Okay, we're back. We're back for more of this, whatever this is. Having fun.
Hello.
Hi. So Lewis is, it's Monday morning still, and Lewis has a really bad headache, and had some toast, hoping to cure it, but it hasn't really worked, has it, Lewis?
No.
No. He's got this crippling white-hot cranial pain that he just can't shake.
So, did you watch, you watched Making a Murderer?
I did, yeah.
On Netflix.
On Netflix.
What did you think of it? There's going to be a few spoilers on this. Well, it's not really...
Oh.
I mean, just if you don't want to... If you want to watch it and you don't want spoilers, then, you know...
Yeah.
Shut up.
No.
I don't care.
I think overall...
Maybe let's spoil it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll spoil it maybe a little bit, yeah. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's very good. It's really compelling. It's very frustrating. And
It's a lot like Serial, the podcast. If you haven't checked out the Serial podcast, you should check that out. And also The Jinx as well on the HBO.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. You
Which
keep
is
telling
great.
me to check it out, but I haven't.
Which I think is kind of better, actually,
Okay.
than this.
All right.
But Making a Murderer is good because it's a good story. Because
Well,
it's about a guy who, first of all, was imprisoned for 18 years for a crime which he apparently didn't commit. But there's
Right,
some grey area over that as well. Because the only... I think it was one pube that exonerated him, wasn't it? Did you see that?
It
like
was,
one
yeah.
pube.
And I mean, there was a lot of evidence sort of pointing towards this Gregory Allen, who, an important part of the story is that the county that prosecuted him and arrested him and got him into jail for 18 years are the same people that knew that sort of the crime fit with stuff that this other guy, Gregory Allen, was doing, and they knew of him, and he was under surveillance and everything, but they let him walk free, and he reoffended a couple of times before getting arrested in the time as well, which was... It's a weird documentary. You feel very sorry for Stephen Avery, obviously, because his whole life has been spent in jail for stuff that he probably didn't do.
There's a very good chance he didn't do it, and therefore he gets out of jail. Okay?
Yeah.
And you feel very sorry for him because he's this kind of sort of hopeless-looking guy who's quite kind of dopey, really, and lives out. But he's a total classic American hick, almost, that he lives out on a junkyard.
Yeah.
And it's kind of slightly creepy about his whole family. They're not very well educated. They're kind of not very wealthy.
No.
They're kind of quite. They obviously don't get on with much of their community.
Yeah.
He had a few minor offences before he went in, so he kind of had this rap sheet.
Yeah.
And therefore, it was fairly you can see how the court sort of said, well, look, I'd rather have him, in prison off the streets than etc. So anyway, he gets out and starts suing the people who put him in for millions of dollars, which is kind of what you should be getting. He should be getting
for 18 years of your life.
18 years.
Yeah.
He should be getting, because he had 3 kids who grew up, without him and stuff. He missed out. It's his whole life, really.
Well, it ruined his life. He had a wife and kids, and a lot of his kids don't even talk to him anymore. His wife, they divorced while he was in jail. I think, there's a lot of like bad shit that happened. But the thing is, like you said, he had some prior convictions, and none of them really sort of painted this picture of a rapist or a murderer, or the things that he's been accused of.
So it was an attempted rape, wasn't it, that he went to jail for 18 years or something?
Yeah, attempted rape and murder, and I think...
No, it wasn't murder though. It was attempted rape, I think, and she didn't even... I don't think it was even actual. It was an actual rape.
No, I don't think it was. But I mean,
and it
what
felt like
happened
a
to
long
her was
sentence.
horrific.
Because people who... It was bad, but I think it was assault. I think she got beaten up and she got attempted rape. I think it was bad. Anyway, look, it was bad, but I think people who drive badly, drunkenly, and hit people with their cars and kill children with their cars get less sentence than this guy did.
Well, he was supposed to serve 35 years, and he only served 18 because they exonerated him, because they some new evidence was introduced.
But the other classic thing was that if he had admitted guilt, he would have been eligible for things like early release. He would have been able to get a shorter sentence. You know,
Yeah.
so there's one of these things to do with it that if he had admitted guilt, and that was very tempting to him,
Yeah.
after he'd served 18 years, he would have, he would have had all these nice things. He would have probably been out earlier. He would have been able to visit his family. He would have been able to see people. He would have got parole and all this crap. Anyway, he never admitted guilt throughout the whole thing. Anyway, so he gets out of jail and but starts suing the county and stuff.
Yeah.
And then when that's just about to go to trial,
Yeah.
okay, about a week before, and he was, in a good setup. He was quite famous for this. A woman goes missing, and her car, mobile phone, and charred bones are found on his property.
Yeah.
On his junkyard, basically. And so he gets arrested, and then his neighbour, who's a 16-year-old boy, goes to the police, or is picked up by the police.
It's his nephew as well, right?
His nephew is picked up by the police, I think, in questioning, but then ends up. I don't know quite what the deal was with him. Actually, the reason why he got interrogated by the police in the first place, because they made it out like he was guilty, so he came along.
Well, I think they interrogated him in the first place because his cousin was interviewed. Remember the 15-year-old girl? She was interviewed, and she mentioned that he was crying a lot, and he described things to her, and that's why they went to question him in the first place, or according to them. And then when it came to it, when she was on trial, she told everybody in the court that basically she'd lied. She'd made up a story because of stuff that she'd seen on the news. And this was another part of the problem. They sensationalized everything so badly on the news that most people who watched the local news in that area or whatever just presumed him guilty straight away, right? Like, just like the way that the media covered everything before the trial even happened was people had him down as this monster murderer who, raped and tortured this woman before slitting her throat and then manually strangling her, and, all this. None of it added up because they didn't find any blood in his house or anything where this supposedly happened. So, this is a guy who's not even averagely intelligent, who is somehow some sort of master at cleaning up a crime scene.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of stuff that seemed like it could have been planted. There's a lot of stuff that was sort of, you could tell that they wanted it so badly to be him who did it, that they just did everything they could to make it fit. And I think that's the point. I think the point is that the handling of the case, it was so bad. It was a joke. Like, times when you were watching this documentary, you would audibly gasp at how stupid the whole thing was. The things that they were alleging, and the way that they went about stuff, and the interviews they had with people, and it was crazy. And the craziest thing is that, throughout all this and all the problems and all of the bad investigations, and whether he was framed or not, and whether it was malicious or not, or whatever, a lot of people should have lost their jobs off the back of that. And it looked likely that they were going to lose their jobs off the back of at least the first one. But
because this second
everybody got caught
out
up in the murder, and everybody forgot about this lawsuit that was being filed for millions. But
so, I mean, yeah,
the argument is that why would you kill someone when you were on like the brink of getting $36 million? Like, because there's every chance that he could have won that lawsuit. It was the people
exactly.
that
it's so strange. It's almost like there's a lot of problems with it. And so the first thing is, well, it's called Making a Murderer, right? And so that means either, I think that's a really, really good title for the show, because in my opinion, the way that feels is either yes, he was made into a murderer, like framed. You know, he was. It's a kind of story about how. First of all, it's a story about how you make or catch a murderer. You know. Secondly, it's about how do you make one if you're faking it. And the third one is that the previous stuff that happened, you know, that 18 years in prison, that could have made him into a murderer. You know, so there is that argument that, you know, by falsely imprisoning an innocent man, if he indeed he was, you know, he would then have possibly been able to do it. But yes, you're right. The question is, why would he do it if, you know, he's just about to get this huge payout? You know, unless he was some sort of monster. You know, why would any one of his like neighbours? Because sometimes they talked a little bit about some of the local people who hated him, and there's a bit of chat I read about it about how his land is worth quite a bit of money or something, and so like his neighbours wanted to frame him or, you know, put him away because they were able to get the land or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, but you'd think if someone was after his inheritance, or if someone was after his money, then they kind of would have waited until he'd actually won the case before they put him away. You know, maybe. And so I don't know.
There's
but the
so
other
many
thing
things that didn't add up, and you know,
there's so many things. And at the end of the day, you know, a woman who was on a documented visit with him as the last caller. Yeah. She met him. He said he met her. And she left, and then, you know, her bones are found on his land with her phone and her car. And if he wasn't this person who had been previously incarcerated, and if he wasn't this person who was suing the police force, you know, you could see there's this real sort of conflict of interest going on. And man, it was just it's such a morally difficult, such a grey kind of area, because at the end of the day, either one, you've put away. I think the big problem which I came away with it at the end is that a lot of people say, oh well, you know, we've got a choice. If like the jury, okay, the jury on that case had a choice, and the choice was, oh, we could either put an innocent man in prison again, or we could risk letting a murderer go free. And they think that's the two options, right? But they're not the two options, okay? The two options are, we can put the wrong man in prison and allow the murderer to go free, right, and close the case, so that murderer will guarantee that he can just offend again because his case will be closed. No one will ever chase that down. You know, no one will ever keep track or find any more evidence, or no more follow-up will happen. Okay, so basically, when you put an innocent man in jail, you guarantee that the not innocent person's got away with it. And so, but if you don't put him in jail and you say, well, okay, the case is still open, it can't have been him, there must be more information, that may lead to, you know, the actual guilty party being found. But it's such a final thing to sort of say, right, we found him, because the way it sort of works is that once the jury find him guilty, that is almost like suddenly some sort of biblical law or legal thing, or like it's almost like history has been rewritten. It's like the jury found him guilty. That means he did do it. For all intents and purposes, he did do it. We have decided this is how we're going to remember things. This is what happened, and it's so final and very sort of scary, really. That
it is, because you think that these people are trustworthy and that, you know, they're protecting people 24/7 and keeping them safe and stuff like that, and they've got a lot of power, and, you know, in this case it seemed like these investigators and these people that were, you know, in law enforcement in the area that he was from or whatever, basically had no fear whatsoever of, you know, planting evidence or, you know, doing their jobs poorly or whatever. And it was really surprising and kind of worrying as well that, you know, this system in this country that's, you know, America's this big, powerful, superpower country, which is meant to be sort of like the, you know, let's look to how America's doing things, but like you don't really, and when you consider that, you know, maybe their criminal justice system is super duper flawed and stuff as well, it's pretty worrying, isn't it? Like off the back of this documentary alone, I think the White House was petitioned like a couple of times with like hundreds and thousands of signatures saying like, what the fuck is going on? Like, can we get these people out of jail? They clearly don't belong there and stuff. And it's they've appealed, and the appeals have been denied at the state and Supreme Courts and stuff, and it's crazy. Like,
I think that said, like, it's very, very difficult to make these calls, and when you're presented with this overwhelming set of evidence that the blood and keys and the bedroom and testimony and all sorts of people, there's this kind of feeling of no smoke without fire. But also when you look at the other end, you think, well, did the police actually kill a young woman to silence a man who was going to sue them? I don't think that they would do that. And so how else did she die? What are the other options for this woman actually?
But the investigation was so bad. There was no other suspects because they just wanted Stephen Avery to be guilty of it, basically.
I mean, exactly.
They went out of their way to not interview any other potential suspects. They didn't interview a single member of her family, ex-boyfriends, nothing. And these are all people that you should be interviewing, as part of an investigation around disappearance and then subsequent murder of a young woman, sort of thing. Like, I think the defense sort of presented that as well. They said, in a lot of cases when there is a murder, it's more often than not it's someone in their family who's done it, sort of thing. It's it's a pretty standard thing to interview family members, and they never did. Because,
I think there's a good chance that she was sort of saying stuff like, oh, I'm going to go and visit that Avery guy, the one who was in prison for 18 years and then sort of just got exonerated. I'm going to his junkyard, his creepy junkyard. There's a good chance she told that to her family and friends and people knew where she was going and kind of knew that they could maybe kill her and burn her body and dump it on the land and or whatever. I don't know. There was certain. It seems very. I don't know though. It seems very convoluted. It seems like sometimes the easiest answer, the almost obvious answer, is the real answer, and that maybe he just did it. And fucking who knows? Like I don't think we're ever going to necessarily know what exactly happened.
Yeah.
I think that's the reality of most court cases. Most court cases aren't like CSI, where someone comes along at the end and tells some sort of confession, and that confession is 100% honest. At the end of the day, I think the majority, or 90% or 95% of court cases or murder cases like this, you're never going to quite know what really happened unless you have a confession.
Yeah, and they sort of fabricated a confession, and it's interesting. Go watch. If you haven't watched it and you've listened to us spoil the shit out of it, go watch it because it's worth watching. It's very, very good.
It's on Netflix.
And if you did watch it and you want to talk to us more about it, hit us up on whatever.
And if you haven't watched it, you're not going to understand this at all.
No, that's true. Yeah,
Sorry
that's
about
true.
that.
You got to see the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll be back next time for more of this.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Peace.